amendments, and staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes. Pursuant to notice, I call up 5713, Expedited Removal of Criminal Aliens Act for purpose of a markup, and move the committee report in favor to the House. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 5713, to authorize the expedited removal of aliens who are criminal.
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open for amendment. Any point, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gill, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for putting together this hearing today. I want to set the stage for this bill as we get started. Imagine a Trinidad Aragua gang member arrives at the southwest border illegally near the height of the Democrat Biden-Harris border crisis in 2023. He's traveled a long way, but of course he's got taxpayer-funded NGOs who have provided him assistance throughout his entire journey. He's one of hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens encountered at the U.S. southwest border that month and more than 2 million that year alone. Because Border Patrol is overwhelmed, he's released into the interior of the country with a notice to appear in immigration court. To remain in the country and get a work permit, he'll file a bare-bones application for asylum that everybody knows is frivolous and stands no chance of success. Another taxpayer-funded NGO in the U.S. told him to do that, and he files his asylum application anyways. Because the immigration court backlog is nearly 4 million cases, it'll be years before his flimsy case is heard by an immigration judge. In the meantime, he'll move to New York or Chicago or San Francisco, be given taxpayer-funded benefits, be arrested for one crime or another, be coddled by sanctuary city leaders, and defended by Democrats who say America's long-standing immigration laws are simply too mean. Yet he'll remain in the immigration court backlog for years, filing continuance after continuance and motion after motion to delay his eventual removal from the United States. Years later, an immigration judge inevitably denies his frivolous asylum claim. The illegal alien gang member will appeal to the Board of Immigration Appeals, which will then take months, if not years, to reach a decision on his case. Once the Board of Immigration Appeals affirms the immigration judge's obvious decision, the illegal alien gang member will again appeal, this time to a federal court of appeals, which will take even more months, if not years, to deny his appeal. That's the process for one hypothetical illegal alien gang member allowed into the United States. It's not abnormal by any means, due to the open borders Democrat administration years ago. Thousands of federal man-hours at the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, and in the federal courts have been expended on this case alone, including countless taxpayer dollars. All of this to deny a frivolous claim by an illegal alien gang member to ensure he's deported from the United States. Today, we'll consider a bill to help end this insane nonsense. The Expedited Removal of Criminal Aliens Act is straightforward. It says if you're a criminal alien in the United States, you cannot game our asylum system and you cannot take advantage of the American people's generosity and remain in the country for years waiting for an immigration court hearing. If you're a foreign national who is convicted of certain crimes, you're ineligible for immigration benefits and relief. You must be detained and you must be deported quickly. For decades, current immigration law has authorized a more efficient process to quickly remove certain dangerous criminal aliens from the country. Under existing law, aggravated felon aliens can be removed from the United States without going through traditional immigration court removal proceedings. Current law also makes aliens convicted of aggravated felonies ineligible for immigration relief, such as asylum, and presumes they are deportable from the United States. This process is known as administrative removal or expedited removal. Every federal court of appeals to consider the constitutionality of these expedited procedures have held that the current statute comports with due process. This bill expands the categories of criminal aliens that may be placed in removal proceedings when they are in criminal custody and authorizes DHS to place additional criminal aliens in expedited removal proceedings. The bill allows DHS to fast-track the deportation of aliens who are not lawful permanent residents and One, are members of a criminal gang, transnational criminal organization, or foreign terrorist organization, or two, have been convicted of dangerous crimes. Democrats, I'm sure, are going to hyperventilate about this bill, but before they do, let's listen to the categories of criminal convictions to which this bill applies. Any felony, any misdemeanor against a member of a vulnerable group, any assault of a law enforcement officer, any sexual offense, any crime of domestic violence, any stalking offense, any crime against children, including sex trafficking of a minor or sexual abuse of a minor, any activity relating to material involving the sexual exploitation of minors, or any violation of a protective order. A vulnerable group in this context includes a child younger than 16, a pregnant woman, an individual with a severe physical or mental disability, and senior citizens over the age of 65. I think, Mr. Chairman, this is a bill that the American people agree with. In fact, a poll from just a few weeks ago showed that 78% of Americans support deporting immigrants who are here illegally and have committed crimes. That includes nearly 70% of Democrats. And those numbers are after a breathless 11-month full court press by Democrats and their far-left media allies to demonize the men and women carrying out federal immigration enforcement every single day. It isn't working. In fact, a clear majority, 56% of Americans, agree with deporting all immigrants who are in the country illegally. Even 36% of Democrats believe that all illegal aliens should be deported. It's no surprise. Let's consider what Democrats did to this country for 4 years. Historic highs of border encounters, with Border Patrol overrun and the southwest border completely abandoned. At least 8 million illegal aliens allowed to enter the United States, including 2 million gotaways who evaded apprehension entirely. Hundreds of aliens on the terrorist watch list encountered at the southwest border, with at least 99 potential terrorists released into the country, and we believe that number is probably significantly higher. That also led to an immigration court backlog that exploded to its highest ever. And the Democrat Party sat by and enabled the border crisis every single step of the way, doing nothing to stop it, in fact, doing everything they could to encourage it. When Democrats controlled and enjoyed unified control of the government with the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate, they went out of their way to leave our border open. They did nothing to secure the border, nothing to keep Americans safer, and nothing to enact what they constantly drone about, which is comprehensive immigration reform. So what have they done? Last Congress, the House passed a bill to secure the border and protect Americans. Every House Democrat voted against it. Last Congress, the House passed a bill to kick out foreign nationals who steal Americans' identities and commit Social Security fraud. 155 Democrats voted against it. Just this Congress, the House passed a bill to kick drunk driving illegal aliens out of the country. 160 House Democrats voted against it. Just 2 months ago, we passed a bill to increase prison sentences for illegal aliens convicted of felonies. 197 House Democrats voted against it. In January, we passed the Lake and Riley Act, named in honor of the Georgia nursing student brutally murdered by an illegal alien. 156 House Democrats voted against it. In this committee, in September, we voted out a bill named after Kayla Hamilton, who was killed by an illegal alien. Every committee Democrat voted against it. At that committee markup, Representative Crockett, our friend, referred to Kayla Hamilton as, quote, a random dead person, end quote. Democrats even shut down the federal government just recently to restore taxpayer-funded health care benefits to illegal aliens. This is the Democrats' legacy on immigration, voting against common sense, rejecting reforms, demonizing the victims of their policies. And that's exactly what the American people resoundingly rejected last November. Foreign terrorists released into American communities, gang members unleashed onto American streets, illegal aliens crowded into American schools and hospitals, foreign nationals signed up for voter rolls, illegal alien benefits bankrolled by hardworking American taxpayers. That is their legacy. And at the end of it all, American communities are abandoned, American people victimized, mothers raped, daughters assaulted, sisters murdered, American cities overwhelmed, public services overrun, American generosity overburdened, and taxpayer budgets overstretched. And the American people said simply, "We're over it." They gave Congress and the president a mandate to secure the border and fix a flawed immigration system that all too often benefits illegal aliens at the literal expense of American citizens. This bill is a step forward in fulfilling that mandate. Let's chart a new path forward. The Expedited Removal of Criminal Aliens Act moves us closer to that goal, and I urge my colleagues to support it. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The ranking member is now recognized for an opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. You know, the two most beautiful words in the Constitution, maybe in the English language, are due process. It's due process that protects our rights and our freedoms from the arbitrary power of government officers who might be completely convinced of the righteousness of what they're doing, but they might not care about your rights, and they might not care about your freedoms, and they might be wrong about the facts. One of my colleagues said when we got into this debate last time to me, well, wait, you're not saying you support due process for guilty people, are you? And that's the whole point. We don't know if they're guilty until there's been due process. So yes, we've got to have due process for everyone. That's what the Constitution talks about. In our first colloquy about the first bill this morning, Mr. Chairman, we heard members saying that due process was just too excruciatingly prolonged and protracted when we were talking about a case where a guy kicked a dog, spent 3 days in jail, and then was deported from the country. And yet again, we hear from the distinguished gentleman from Texas that due process just takes too long. It just goes on for too long. Look, this bill is a frontal strike on due process. When you think of the government officials who are going to be wielding this lawless power, don't think of the leaders that you love and know the most, the ones who are inviting you to dinner. Think of the ones you loathe and fear the most, because those are the ones you will be empowering also to designate people at whim as terrorists and as drug traffickers. This bill is extraordinary. It would allow the Secretary of Homeland Security to unilaterally declare any of the following people a terrorist or a gang member, even if they've never been convicted of anything, even if they're not being prosecuted for anything right now, and then deport them. Anybody traveling on a tourist visa, anyone working here legally on an H-1B work visa, or an agricultural visa, or a summer work visa, anyone studying at an American university at the undergraduate level or the graduate level can just be designated a terrorist or a drug trafficker without any legal or administrative process at all. The summary designation of people lawfully present here as terrorists or gang members and their removal from the country would take place without any necessary evidentiary proof or any standard at all. This bill destroys due process. It's in plain violation of even the Roberts Court's holding that under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, persons in America are guaranteed some form of due process before being removed. Yet time and again, we've seen this administration want to designate hundreds of people, thousands of people, en masse, as gang members and terrorists without any concrete, individualized, or relevant evidence to back it up. And these wild accusations have led to devastating consequences. Take the case of Jose Reyes Barrios, a 36-year-old professional soccer player and coach who was an asylum seeker from Venezuela, awaiting his asylum hearing. Unbeknownst to his family, he was swept up and flown out of the country to that famous torture prison in El Salvador as part of the government's dragnet campaign against Tren de Aragua. He had no criminal record. He had no criminal charges, but he was sent to the mercy of a brutal dictator in El Salvador simply because he's got a tattoo on his right arm, which was mistakenly associated with Tren de Aragua. In fact, the tattoo is of a soccer ball topped with the crown, which signifies the soccer club Real Madrid. He had no legal process. He had no judge. He had no jury. He had no right to counsel. He had no opportunity to present evidence or to hear the charges against him. He had no opportunity to cross-examine. He had no due process. Look at one other case, Andre Hernandez Romero, a gay makeup artist and barber who fled Venezuela's brutal Maduro regime, which was persecuting him for being anti-gay and for speaking up for free speech in Venezuela. He'd passed his credible fear interview in our asylum process. His asylum claim was pending when he was swept up in the government's campaign because of his benign tattoos of two crowns, one symbolizing his beloved father, one symbolizing his beloved mother. And that became the basis for his removal, with a unilateral administrative power to declare somebody somehow at odds with the government. Romero missed his asylum hearing because he was at the torture prison in Salvador. 60 Minutes reviewed his media posts going back for more than a decade and could not find a shred of evidence linking him to a gang activity, and yet he was described as a gang member. To this day, the government has never brought forward any evidence. He's had no constitutional due process whatsoever. And our friend from Texas wants to make this the law. He wants to make this official, that the government can declare anybody a gangbanger or a terrorist without any legal process at all and kick him out of the country. Come on. This is the Judiciary Committee of the United States House of Representatives. How can we be pushing this? And by the way, if you don't care about soccer players and gay barbers from Venezuela, how about this? Are you okay with the Secretary of Homeland Security having a unilateral right to deem far-right white South Afrikaner groups like the Boer Mag, whose leader tried to assassinate Nelson Mandela, designated as terrorists and gangsters, and then simply removed from the country? Is that a power you want to vest unilaterally in a government official? Do you want future administrations to have the right to describe visitors from right-wing groups and parties in Europe, like Alternative for Deutschland in Germany, or Rassemblement National Français, as terrorists and gangsters? This bill is an extremely blunt instrument. It could be used to conduct mass deportations and to strip people here of their rights to due process under the Constitution, as even this Supreme Court has found they have. I hope everybody will join me in my opposition and yield back to this bill, and yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record. The gentleman from Texas is recognized to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Without objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute will be considered as read and shall be considered base text. For the purposes of amendment, the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas to explain the amendment.
This amendment, this amendment amends the relevant statutory sections to which this bill applies, including the mandatory detention statute, expedited removal statute, and withholding of removal statute. The amendment also defines criminal gang, applies the bill's provisions to members of transnational criminal organizations, adds a severability clause, and makes applicable aliens ineligible for all immigration benefits and relief. The amendment makes technical and conforming changes throughout the existing statute. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition?
Mr. Chairman.
Go to Ms. Jayapal. Even though it was a tie on the hands in the air, I'll go with the lady.
He's just
first.
keeping me from our CPC meeting.
Okay.
But that's fine.
And me too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in strong opposition to this bill, and I think the ranking member laid out the severity of the situation very, very clearly. This bill gives the Secretary of Homeland Security nearly limitless discretion to label any non-citizen as a terrorist or a gang member and subject non-green card holders to a lightning-fast removal proceeding before not an impartial judge, but before a DHS official. And I was just looking at my phone and saw a story of these mass deportations, rapid deportations that are happening, and a story of somebody in New York, a woman who was illegally deported, and they left her 2-year-old child behind. And this was because she was deported in 4 days. All of the process was essentially waived. That is what this administration is doing. They have falsely accused countless innocent people of being gang members and terrorists, and they are using that label as an excuse to ship them off to torture chambers and even killing them. I'm just disgusted that the majority has looked at this abysmal record and decided that what the administration needs is not less power and more oversight, but actually more power to continue to do this. We should be conducting oversight on the Trump administration's abuse of authority and attempts to take over cities across the country in the name of immigration enforcement. Now, last month in Chicago, I led 18 of my colleagues to conduct the largest act of congressional immigration oversight since Trump took office. And what we heard in Chicago was absolutely devastating. People of all statuses who were terrorized by Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bovino and rogue immigration officials across Chicagoland. And the day after our shadow hearing, Bovino actually deployed tear gas in a residential neighborhood as children were gathering for a Halloween parade. In the words of a federal judge, quote, "These kids, their sense of safety was shattered, and it's going to take a long time for that to come back," end quote. That same weekend, Border Patrol agents dragged a 67-year-old U.S. citizen from his car, breaking 6 of his ribs, while children in Halloween costumes were watching in horror. And you know what? His crime was turning down a street to get home. He never resisted. In another incident, Bovino, the head of CBP, admitted to lying about whether a rock hit him before he deployed tear gas. We also heard from an active duty service member risking his life for his country. His father, he flew back to this country because his father was kidnapped. By the time he got back here, his father had been deported. This is a guy who's serving our country, and he said, how is it possible that I'm giving my life for this country and they're deporting my father who did absolutely nothing wrong? Another 19-year-old U.S. citizen forced to take on her mother's business and care for her younger sibling following her mother's detainment. And folks may remember the militarized raid on an apartment building in the dead of the night that resulted in U.S. citizens, many of them African Americans, dragged out of bed, children, some naked, zip-tied, and detained for hours. And the Trump administration was claiming that this building was, quote, filled with Tren de Aragua gang members and said that they captured 2 confirmed gang members. Stephen Miller claimed that it was, quote, one of the most successful law enforcement operations we've seen in the country. And yet, a month and a half later, prosecutors have not filed a single criminal charge against anyone who was arrested, nor have they revealed any evidence that showed that anyone actually belonged to a gang. In fact, many of those that were arrested in the raid were granted voluntary departure, and that would not have happened if they were a serious threat. For any federal agents who are watching this, remember that you swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. This conduct that we're seeing does not hold up with that oath, and we are going to hold you accountable. Everyone that is involved in this absolute travesty of and violation of justice. And I want to thank Representatives Chuy Garcia and Delia Ramirez, who helped me put this on, as well as Representatives Mary Gay Scanlon, Becca Ballant, Sidney Kamlager-Dove, and Jasmine Crockett for coming to Chicago, along with many other colleagues. This is not normal, and we should be standing up to actually uphold the laws of this country. I urge Republican colleagues to join us and vote no on this. Mr. Chairman, I also seek a unanimous consent
Gentleman may make her request.
to enter into the record the following articles from ABC. Chicago's children are getting caught in the chaos of immigration crackdowns.
Without objection.
From the Washington Post, suburban Chicago dad headed to store with toddler says they were pepper sprayed by federal agents.
Without objection.
From the Chicago Sun-Times, feds deployed tear gas on the far southeast side even after cops told them they had no gas masks.
Without objection.
From The Guardian, Chicago daycare worker freed from judge rules ICE arrest unlawful.
Without objection.
From The Independent, U.S. citizen 67 has ribs broken by Border Patrol agents after being dragged out of car while driving home into street they'd blocked off.
Without objection.
From ProPublica, I lost everything. Venezuelans were rounded up in a dramatic midnight raid but never charged with a crime.
Without objection.
From the Chicago Tribune, U.S. citizens racially profiled by immigration agents in Chicago, quote, I felt like a piece of trash.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The lady yields back. Gentleman from, excuse me, from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to remind the committee that administrative removal is already on the books right now. All this law does is simply expand the categories under which an illegal alien can be deportable via administrative removal. In fact, administrative removal was used 13,000 times by President Obama, over 12,000 times under President Biden. Were those deportations a violation of due process?
Would the gentleman yield?
And no, I will not. And if we want to talk about due process, as my colleagues would like to, where was the due process for Rachel Morin, who was slaughtered by an illegal alien? Where was the due process for Kayla Hamilton, who was slaughtered by an illegal alien? What about Laken Riley or Jocelyn Nungary? Where was the due process for them? Where was the outrage when the last administration ushered into our communities Tren Aragua gang members, MS-13 cartel members, and terrorists from around the world? I think that the American people can see that Democrats reserve their tears for illegal aliens who break our laws and victimize our communities. But if we want to talk about due process, let's talk about due process. Federal courts of appeals have routinely upheld this law's administrative removal procedures as they have existed for the last 30 years. In fact, every federal court of appeals to consider the constitutionality of the expedited removal procedures under Section 238 of the Immigration and Nationality Act has held that the statute comports with due process. Nearly 3 decades ago, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit held that, quote, clearly the expedited statutory deportation scheme comports with the minimum requirements of due process pronounced by the Supreme Court. The Fifth Circuit outlined the due process requirements, quote, that an alien be provided notice of the charges against him, a hearing before an executive or administrative tribunal, and a fair opportunity to be heard, end quote, all of which this statute satisfies and did satisfy. As recently as this past July, the Fifth Circuit reiterated that holding, as have the U.S. Courts of Appeals for the 4th, 6th, 9th, 10th, and 11th Circuits. Democrats' fear-mongering contradicts the law, contravenes the text of the bill, and undermines efforts to ensure that dangerous illegal aliens can be quickly removed from the United States. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you. I move to strike the last word. I'm recognized. Thank you.
Recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate some of what my colleague from Texas discussed in his long soliloquy to begin the introduction of this bill. And I agree very wholeheartedly that our asylum system is broken. And I agree very much that it takes far, far too long to adjudicate asylum claims. That was actually corrected in the Senate's bipartisan immigration bill that Senator Lankford and Senator Murphy and Senator Sinema had agreed upon at the very beginning of 2024. Unfortunately, Donald Trump intervened to submarine that bill because he didn't want Joe Biden to get a win. So now my colleagues on the other side of the aisle continue to complain about the asylum system and continue to introduce these expedited removal statutes and bills to account for the fact that asylum processes can take 7, 8 years. That bill put it at 6 months. 6 months. And so yet here we are with another bill for expedited removal without any due process. And it almost feels like this is two completely separate bills mixed into one. And I think I know why. Because there are 3 categories of aliens, as it says here, who are subject to expedited removal. First is a member of a criminal gang or a criminal organization, as determined by the Secretary of Homeland Security. Not a judge, not an independent adjudicator, the Secretary of Homeland Security. The second is a member of an organization designated as a foreign terrorist organization pursuant to or has provided material support to such an organization. Again, as determined by the Secretary of Homeland Security. The third is someone who's been convicted of a felony or a misdemeanor against a vulnerable group. Well, that is totally different. A conviction, of course, requires due process. So I know where this is going. We, on the Democratic side, are going to oppose this because we've already seen, this is not hypothetical, we've seen the type of people that the Secretary of Homeland, the type of evidence that the Secretary of Homeland Security uses to determine someone to be a member of a gang. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, as we all remember, was whisked away to CICOT in El Salvador, where we now have numerous prisoners who said that they were tortured because he was allegedly a gang member because of tattoos that he had. That, I guess, is how we determine whether someone is a gang member. And so what we're going to hear is, obviously, this is preposterous to allow the Secretary of Homeland Security to make these determinations with full discretion, without any review, without any independent arbiter, to determine whether the evidence meets that. I mean, this is fundamental due process. I know my Republican colleagues would not possibly support Alejandro Mayorkas from making these decisions. There's no possible way. But what we're going to now hear is, the Democrats are against deporting convicted felons against children. That's going to be your talking point. Just like your talking point is still that the shutdown was about providing health care to illegal aliens, when that's been debunked over and over and over again. So if you want to work on our immigration system, you want to fix our asylum system so that we don't have 80% of applicants be denied, but they've been here for 7 years, creating a tremendous pull, I am with you. Let's do it. But don't bring expedited removal for someone that the Secretary of Homeland Security alleges and determines on her own is a member of a terrorist organization. Those people should be deported, but they should have due process. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair will take the time, but I will yield to the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wish Democrats had been as worried about gangs over the last administration as they are about a gang definition in this bill. Because of Democrat policies, Tren de Aragua has an established presence from coast to coast in our country. Nearly every single day, we hear stories about the terror wrought by these heinous criminals. In August, ICE arrested a Tren de Aragua member with an active warrant in Bogota, where he was sentenced to 7 years for trafficking and possessing illegal firearms. He had been caught and released at the border during the Biden-Harris administration. In May, ICE arrested multiple Tren de Aragua members who were involved in a mass shooting at a Chicago house party last December. And these arrests are not limited to Tren de Aragua members. Earlier this year, ICE arrested a gang member from El Salvador with U.S. convictions for sexual indecency with a child, failure to register as a sex offender, illegal reentry, and illegal entry. ICE also arrested an MS-13 gang member with a homicide conviction and a Sureños 13 gang member with 6 convictions for drug possession, 3 convictions for resisting arrest, 2 convictions for domestic violence, and 2 convictions for assault. These are the crimes that are the obvious result of Democrats' open border policies, so today it's no surprise that they'd rather attempt to poke holes in a clear definition rather than own up to their past mistake. The definition of criminal gang here is straightforward. It clearly delineates the requirements to be considered a gang, and it closely tracks another gang definition already in statute, the definition of a criminal street gang in 18 U.S. Code 521. Federal immigration officials shouldn't have to wait for an illegal alien gang member to harm, kill, rape, or terrorize an American citizen before expediting the removal of that dangerous foreign national. This is a common sense provision that creates safer streets for every American and closes a gaping loophole in current law. But if we want to talk about how these determinations are often being made, we hear rhetoric about gang tattoos. Let's look at this gang tattoo here. 666 on the forehead of an illegal alien, Antonio Israel Lazo Quintanilla. I simply do not want an illegal alien with 666 tattooed on his forehead in my country, and I don't think that most Americans would disagree with me there. As we've talked about earlier, this law does comport with due process. There are opportunities for illegal aliens to appeal decisions, deportation decisions, but if Democrats would like to explain why this illegal alien with 666 tattooed on his forehead should be given free rein in the interior of our country, they are welcome to. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California is recognized. I yield back on my time. The gentleman from California is recognized.
One day we'll reconcile, Mr. Chairman, the richness of an Ivy League investment banker, Nepo congressman telling us that we need to get rid of the people who pick our food, wash our cars, build our homes, enrich our communities. We'll get to that. But today, this legislation is about making it easier for ICE to remove more of our friends and neighbors. And I guess the question I have is it really that hard for you right now? Is there anything that's getting in your way from just lawlessly going into our communities and detaining American citizens, terrorizing women as masked bandits who are not identified, run through the streets, chase people through fields, go into car washes, go to Home Depot parking lots? Like, are you having a difficult time just ripping people away from their families, and you think you need more abilities to do it? Also, quite interesting that you're asking for more legal authorities because you don't even follow the laws that are on the books right now. So what are we doing here, I guess, is my first question. But the American people are telling you, get the hell out of our homes, our streets, and our lives. And I want to play a video, Mr. Chairman, that illustrates that.
I was going to school.
When the spray hit Veraza on the side of his head.
Mama, you okay, Mama? You okay? Are you okay? He's a citizen! He's a citizen!
They do not have a warrant. They forcefully open the door.
No resistance. What am I doing? Carry! Hey, get on the ground! I love you, let me go! He doesn't have charges! Why are you letting him out? You Get back, I'm gonna shoot you. You're gonna what? You're gonna shoot me?
Not touching the car, leave me alone. Look what they're doing, sneezing.
The American people were promised that the most violent individuals would be removed. And instead, we've been given this. You even deported a child, U.S. citizen, fighting cancer. You deported Miguel Lopez, my constituent, who's been in the country for almost 30 years, worked at a local winery, sent his kids to the high school in my hometown, and he showed up to his immigration proceeding following the law, and he was picked up by ICE and sent to Mexico. And every Sunday night, his wife Rosa and their family look at an empty chair where Miguel used to sit for 30 years with his family. What did we get out of that? Who's better off because Miguel, who was following the law, is not in our community? But earlier this month, the American people from Virginia to New Jersey to Pennsylvania, all the way out to California, sent a message that a reckoning is on its way, that accountability is coming. And this lawlessness that's gone unchecked, a lot's going to change. The masks are going to come off. Officers will identify themselves. And Kristi Noem and Tom Homan, you should familiarize yourself with the four corners of this room. Kristi Noem and Tom Homan, get to know that witness chair. You're going to be parked in it for a long time. You're going to have a lot of questions under oath with the subpoena power. And I hope what you're doing is clean and can withstand the scrutiny that everyone on this side of the aisle is going to bring. You think we won't do it. You think you're invincible. You're wrong. Accountability is coming. You've got about a year, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The committee will stand, we'll come to you when we come back. We're going to have to stand in recess because we have a bill on the floor that Mr. Raskin and I have to manage. And so we will be recess until after that debate, after the vote series, I believe. Then we will be back, and we plan on plowing through as much of this agenda as we possibly can today. So with that, the committee stands in recess.